Hey everybody, Antoni here, and I just came home from watching Janacek's Katya Kabanova, which was shown at the Staatsoper Schiller Theater, starring Eva-Maria Westbroek in the title role, and starring alongside her is the great Wagnerian soprano Deborah Polaski as the Kabanova. As always for this review, I have my little program here with me so that just in case I forget any names or screw up with pronunciation, I have this as my guide. The conductor for the evening was none other than the great Sir Simon Rattle, who I heard in a lot of recordings um, and from a lot of compositions from Wagner, Britten, Berlioz, Strauss, and a lot of the other great composers of the past. The production was by Andrea Brett. The set design was by Annette Murschetz. The costumes were by Silke Verret and Mark Vega. The lights were handled by Alexander Koppelmann. The scenery was by Michael Schar. And the chorus master was Frank Flade. Now, the thing about Katya Kabanova is that it's such a depressing opera. In my opinion, it's a lot more depressing than that of Leos Janacek's earlier work, Yenufa. I haven't really seen this opera, well, until tonight, but I have read the synopsis from a lot of stuff like sites from the web and even from some books like Who's Who in Opera and great opera recordings on disc. And looking at the synopsis, this is such a depressing opera. I mean, you have the main heroine, Katya, go through so much pain and agony. I mean, she wants love, she wants compassion, she wants freedom, but she gets none of that. All she ends up getting are thoughts of suicide, thoughts of death, and Tishan not making love to her, and the Kabanaka being a huge bitch to her. Now, in all of opera, there is not one character who is so cold hearted, so horrible, so heartless like the Kabanaka. I think the only other opera villainess that pretty much equals her has to be the princess from Puccini's Suor Angelica. As I've read in Who's Who in Opera, the Kabanaka is quite similar to the Kostelnichka because of the position that they have as women of God, so to say, or even sextons. While the Kostelnichka is very loving, as on a genuine level, to Yanufa, the Kabanaka is basically cold hearted and unfeeling. And she makes it her mission in life to make Katya's life a living hell. But even though she's such an unlikable villainess, or an unlikable character, she's a great villainess. And she's attracted a lot of great singers to portray this witch of a character, like Leonie Rizanek, Anya Celia, Astrid Varnay, Eva Randova, Nadezhda Kniplova. She's attracted a lot of fantastic singers. And why shouldn't she be such a great character to sing? I think she definitely has one of the greatest music sung by a lot of singers, whether they're sung by a contralto, a dramatic mezzo, or a dramatic soprano late in their career. Still, she has great scenes all in all. But I think Katya for me has the greater scenes in general, whether it's with Boris, with Varvara, or even with just Boris, Varvara, and Vanya. That's basically the scene I love in the opera. And yeah, I even consider this opera a lot more depressing than Yanufa, but it's still great. It basically shows that there are people in life that really want freedom and want happiness, but in the end, they kind of spend their lives in misery. And I basically felt sorry for Katya in this opera. So, but if you haven't really seen it yet, I really recommend that you check it out. But, anyways, going into the production, when I saw the set design of this opera, I was like, just wow. This production really reflects Katya's inner turmoil of how she feels about the world around her. It's dark, it's depressing, it's basically an unhappy environment. So basically, in the first scene, you have Katya inside a refrigerator, as in to reflect that she wants to be alone, far from this cruel reality. And then you have Decoy and Boris watching television, albeit on a low quality, small television. And the whole environment of this production was, like I said, very dark and it was very gray. Yes, there were some scenes that there was like rain on the dinner scene of the Kabanova, the maids, and Katya, and it does really heighten the the world of depression that Katya lives in. And even in the final scene, we see all of these candles and men and women praying as if to symbolize that Katya was gone from this world. And in traditional productions, Katya would jump off the Volga River, whereas in this production, she slits herself on the wrists. I didn't really see what she used because I was sitting in the very front row, as in the first row. But I think it's easy to say that she was slitting herself with a razor blade. Yeah. It was basically safe to say that she was slitting herself with a razor blade, which I thought was a lot more effective. Let's face it, this was a woman who is on her last leg in life, and she can't take any more of this pain and suffering. So I think it's a lot more chilling to see her slit her wrist, and it really adds to that effect. So overall, this is a very interesting production, therefore mirroring Katya's view of the world as grim and cruel and dark as it is. And I thought it did such an amazing job. Now let's get on to the singers, which I'm very excited to talk about. In the title role of Katya Kabanova, as I said, we have Eva-Maria Westbroek, a Dutch soprano who has been well known in a lot of Verdi, Puccini, Wagner, and Strauss operas. Hearing her as Katya was just simply amazing. Her high notes were piercing as lightning. Her low notes were very good as well. Her middle notes were all amazing. She had such a strong and powerful instrument. And when she had to sing pianissimo, she did it in the most heavenly way possible. And as an actress, she was equally as convincing. As in, equally as convincing. I was able to see all of the suffering, all of the pain, all of the depression that Katya goes through throughout this entire opera. I was basically feeling her in the moment. And that is just how convincing of an actress and singer Miss Westbrook is. And when the when there was the curtain call She had one of the hugest round of applause, and she was very deserving of that. She did an amazing job of painting this picture of how Katya views the world around her, and coupled with her magnificent and spot on singing. Brava to her. In the role of the Kabanica, like I said, we have the great Wagnerian soprano Deborah Polaski, who was very well known in the roles of Brunhilde, Isolde, Kundry, Ortrud, and Electra. And seeing her as the Kabanica was definitely a huge feast for my ears and eyes. Vocally, she still has it. She still has her strong and powerful instrument, and dramatically speaking, she was so spot on. I mean, she didn't go all hammy with her evil nature, but you could really see just how much of a cold hearted woman this Kabanica person really is. And Miss Pulaski does an amazing job painting this type of picture. And in her little scene with Decoy, when she's like peeling the potatoes and eating it in a lascivious fashion, I thought it was just fun seeing her and Mr. Pablo Junca as the Decoy um, work off each other with Mr. Junca shoving potatoes in her mouth, and I thought it was just fun. And the presence that she has on stage was definitely something I could just feel amazed at. So, vocally speaking, she still has her strong and magnificent voice, and her portrayal of the Kabanica was just chilling. And then we have the role of Tijan, the Kabanica's spineless son. And he's sung by Stefan Wugema, who was also Tamino from Mozart's Magic Flute in the same opera house. Hearing him in the role of Tijan was definitely a pleasure as well. He was able to use his tenor voice in a sort of unlikable, um, smarmy, yet character tenor like fashion, as if to convey just how unlikable Tishan can be as both a husband to Katya and as Kabanaca's spineless son. I feel like he was definitely great at just making Tishan such an unlikable person. Why, you ask? Because Tishan is just so spineless. He wouldn't make love to Katya, and he beats the shit out of her. Yeah. But we don't really see that happen on stage. I mean, Katya basically says that Tishan beats the crap out of her. But still, he was able to make such a great picture of such an unlikable character like Tishan. And his voice really was amazing all throughout the opera. So kudos to him in such a role like that. In the role of Boris, we have Pavel Chernoch. I've never really heard of this tenor before, but my goodness, listening to him in this role was a huge pleasure. His voice was round and it was full. It was definitely a powerful instrument. His high notes were amazingly like lightning. It was just a thrill to hear those high notes come out from Mr. Chernoch's mouth. And he was able to make such a strong impression in the role of Boris. And who wouldn't really love this guy in this role? I mean, he was pretty much Boris incarnate. He was able to make Boris such a roguishly charming character, and that's what I saw through Mr. Chernoch's portrayal of Boris, but more than anything, it's his singing that was the hugest aspect of his character. His voice was definitely spot on with all the notes. It was a well focused and powerful instrument that I'm sure that will be preserved for years and years to come. In the role of Vanya Kudryas, we have Florian Hoffman. Now, before the beginning of this opera, a gentleman said that Mr. Hoffman wasn't really feeling so well, basically feeling under the weather, but I didn't really hear any signs of that. His voice was definitely good, and his intonation was really great as well. I mean, he was able to make such a memorable portrayal of Kudryas and use it to such great advantage. I mean, just looking at Kudryas, I could see that he's quite the opposite of Boris. I mean, Kudryas is a little bit tamer compared to Boris. And I definitely like that physical banter with Chernoch and Mr. Hoffman. It was just fun seeing two tenors trying to beat the crap out of each other. I mean, just wow. It was just a lot of fun. And vocally, he was, like I said, very good. So, all signs that Mr. Florian Hoffman was under the weather was just out of the window. I could honestly hear that he has such a healthy sounding voice and a great stage presence. In the role of Varvara, we have Russian mezzo-soprano Anna Lapkovskaya. Yeah, Anna Lapkovskaya. What a magnificent instrument she has. It was just gorgeous. It was like, it was just like, her voice basically made me melt like butter. She had such a homogeneous voice, and she has such a lovely, dramatic, like, quality to her voice. And her stage presence as Varvara was definitely spot on. I mean, she's the total opposite to Katya's consistent thoughts of suicide and depressed world that she lives in. This Varvara is spunky, feisty, flighty, flirtatious, and somewhat minxish. And she's such a great foil to Westbrook's Katya. And really, Lapkovskaya looked amazing. Anna really, Anna Lapkovskaya looked very amazing. She looked very youthful, and she was very pretty, and I expect to see more of her. Sure, she may have some small roles in this opera house, the Staatsoper Theater, but I really hope that she'll have a lot more dramatic roles in the near future. Here's hoping for the best, Miss Lapkovskaya. You're a great singer, and frankly, you have made such a memorable portrait of such a fun character like Varvara. In the role of the merchant decoy, we have bass baritone Pavlo Hunka. His voice was absolutely a dark and magnificent basso voice, um, bass baritone voice. It was really an amazing instrument that I loved listening to, and his stage presence was also as great. I mean, he was able to make Decoy such an unlikable character, and it's really fun seeing both Miss Polaski and Mr. Honka go at each other with stuffing potatoes in Miss Polaski's mouth. I mean, that scene was just definitely a lot of fun watching, and his stage presence was definitely spot on. I mean, he was able to make Decoy such an unlikable person as well, but the Kabanaka is a lot more unlikable. So ultimately, he had such an amazing instrument and great stage presence. In the smaller roles, we have Roman Treikel as Cooligan, who basically wore a black um, robe and his head is all shaved. Even though he had such a small role, his voice was definitely spot on. And his stage presence was also spot on as well, conveying that type of authority, that type of um, dignity, so to say. And even the scenes where the young Katya is running around him, I thought was really great. So even though Mr. Trekel had such a small role, I felt like he was able to pull it off really well. And then we have the two maids, Glasha and Feklusha, sung respectively by Emma Sarkisian and Ariadne Queiroz. Miss Sarkisian was definitely great acting the role of Glasha. She was able to make Glasha a smarmy, somewhat sassy old woman, and her stage presence was also very spot on as well. However, vocally, I could really hear the signs of aging in her voice. Because let's face it, she's been singing for about like 40 plus years in her life as a mezzo soprano. But still, even though her voice sounded quite tattered, it's her stage presence that really sold me, even though her character was quite small. The same can be said for um, Miss Adriana Queiroz, but her voice was definitely wonderful. She had such a lovely lyrical sounding voice, and Miss Adriana Queiroz was quite a convincing actress as well. So both these ladies did a really good job. In the role of the woman of the folk, we have Blanca Modra. She didn't really sing, but her stage presence with the maids and with Katya and with the men and the Kabanica, well, she had really good chemistry with them. So overall, it was a great evening of opera. It may be the first time that I saw Katya Kabanova in its entirety, but overall, it was just fantastic. There was excellent singing, a very interesting production, and great conducting, all thanks to Sir Simon Rattle and the orchestra of the Staatsoper Schiller Theater. So I have nothing to say but great things about this production, of the singers, and of course to Mr. Rattle who led the orchestra in the chorus. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune into tomorrow's review where I review Strauss's Salome, which is also going to be live at the Staatsoper Schiller Theater. Until then, this is Antoni signing off and wishing you all a good night.